Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Astrology Hub Podcast. This is our flagship show dedicated to sharing the multitude of astrological perspectives and approaches. We feature up-and-coming astrologers as well as living legends in the field, and we connect you with experts and thought leaders in fields related to astrology, demonstrating how astrology can support you in so many different areas of your life. I am so happy to be here today with archetypal astrologer Amma Li. Amma Li has been on the Astrology Hub podcast several times. If you're interested in referring back to some of her episodes, I'll tell you those episode numbers later. But she is also going to be an inner circle guide for us in December of 2021 for the Sagittarius lunar cycle, which is going to be a huge one. She's going to be talking to us about that today, just giving us some insights into the energy of December, and also talking about the mastery class that she is going to be presenting as an inner circle guide, which is embracing the tension between opposing energies in your astrological chart using voice dialoguing, which is something you're going to learn all about here today. And she's also going to be featured on the solstice panel tomorrow. So she's going to be one of 7 astrologers on our free solstice panel. This is going to be taking a look at the astrology for the rest of the year and into 2022. If you're curious and interested and want to learn more, please join us. It's entirely free. It's happening tomorrow, June 3rd at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern. We will have a recording of it if you can't make it live. Just go to astrologyhub.com/solstice panel to register today. Again, that's astrologyhub.com/solstice panel. We would love to have you there. And Amma Li, I am so happy to have you on the show today and to be able to connect with you again tomorrow. So welcome back to the Astrology Hub podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. So let's dive in a little bit. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to read a little bit of your bio, just for those that are new to Amma Li Grace. So Amma Li is a natural-born artist of consciousness and Gnostic adventurer. My gosh, Amma Li, I love how you say that. Drawing from 12 years of immersive study with the Western astrology and the Gene Keys, and her ingenuity as an improv performance artist, she offers an original approach to the process of unlocking genius and embodying soul. She's also an incredible musician. We've used Amma Li's music in a lot of our events, and just a really dynamic, amazing woman. And we're just really happy to have you. So let's look at December. Let's start there before we go into the opposing energies in the chart conversation. Let's talk about December. What do you have your eye on? What's the overarching energy of December?
Yes. The easiest way to simplify it is endings and beginnings. And December is sort of it's a month for that in our culture, celebrating the end of the year. But there's this solar eclipse that happens on December 3rd that is sort of this opening into the next 6 months. But really, we can see that we're at such a huge cusp in our evolution as a species. Nothing is the same. And so many of the structures that have been, dismantling, so much spaciousness between that which was established and that which we're sort of in this transition phase. So I think that eclipse is so powerful. It's in Sagittarius. And just how we had a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius just this last week, I think we're going to be seeing echoes of that 6-month cycle playing out, and where we were in this last, week or just period of our lives, really given the opportunity to let some of our old belief structures and come into contact with the constructs of reality that are changing and leave some of that stuff behind. In December, it's this new frontier where the solar eclipse is in Sagittarius. It's a new moon solar eclipse. So it's reaching forward and saying, how can we align our vision for what we are calling in a way that really at this time in our history is so important to guide us in the direction that we want to go as a species and as a planet.
Amma Li, I'm hearing echoes of December of 2022, of 2020 as well.
Yes.
So it's interesting that we have this like exclamation point on the energy of both years, right? 2020, I remember that was like, this is going to be, a massive turning point. And 2021, we're having the same thing. How do you see them similar and how do you see them different?
I would even reach back into the year before when Saturn and Pluto in January 2020 came into that conjunction in the 20, I think it was 22 degrees of Capricorn. I think that is even something we're seeing as like almost like the template that's set of something that's like the structures of our society coming apart, and this whole changing relationship to power and building the kind of world we want to be in. This kind of connects to where another piece that's so important to December of 2021 is that Venus is going to be stationing retrograde on December 19th and beginning a phase that will set us up for the birth of a new Venus phase, which Venus has these 19-month cycles. She has 5 of them every 8 years. I've learned so much from Adam Gainsbourg about this, the Venus phases. And so and when she stations retrograde, she's right exactly on Pluto at the 26th degree of Capricorn, which tells me that there's definitely some transition, that we're entering a phase of transition and rebirthing of something new right around these degrees where Saturn and Pluto came to set the template for such massive change moving forward. So there's more to say about that, but that's one of the things I'd say is different, is that we are now fully in the momentum of, that we have traction in the material world as far as things really changing. And so the templates, the Sagittarian templates of our belief structures, I think are even more quick to manifest and than they were before.
Are you, okay, what else? Let's look at a few more things of December, a few more highlights, because tomorrow we're going to have 7 astrologers on, everybody. So each astrologer won't be able to go super, super, super deep. So we want to spend a little bit of time just looking a little deeper into the month that Amma Li is going to be an inner circle guide. So what else are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's probably going to be a highlight of tomorrow, is that the third and final Saturn-Uranus exact square happens in December. I got a lucky month. It's jam-packed.
And it always works this way, you guys. We have months all like assigned out, but then some scheduling changes happened this year. So Amma Li actually wasn't always going to be the December guide, but she is now. And she said she fell into it and was like, oh my gosh, like, wow, this is going to be my time.
Yeah. It feels like it's an honor. It feels like a responsibility as well, because it just feels so momentous and part of the Saturn-Uranus square. By the time we're at the third exact square, we're starting to see things playing out and we're integrating the lessons, and and as we know, these cycles, they take years, especially when we're looking at macro levels of societal changes and such. So obviously we'll be seeing the ripples of this, but the third and final crossing is such an important integration of that which has been stirring in our world and our psyche. So it's just, we're sitting in between paradigms. And I think that's so much of what the Saturn-Uranus square tells the story of 2 paradigms that we could see clashing. We could also see phasing from one to the other. And it all depends on how we navigate those energies and hold them, which really leads into the work, the masterclass that I'm going to be teaching, or mastery teaching, about holding opposites, because Saturn and Uranus have a wonderful differing relationship that we can learn how to hold the tension of both, which I think is just very important at this time.
Amma Li, because Saturn-Uranus square is such a highlight of 2021, and because it's going to be highlighted again during your month, can you tell us a little bit about how you've been reading that energy? I know we've had a lot of astrologers talk about it, but it's interesting to note how astrologers pull out different angles or aspects of those two planets when they're talking about these squares. So what are you seeing in the Saturn-Uranus square?
You know, it's such a full spectrum. I see a rocket ship trying to leave the atmosphere, and it's rattling, you know, before it can actually hit that point of leaving the atmosphere and just gliding in the anti-gravity. It's in like the structures are shaking. And so that is kind of what it feels like in my own personal life and in so many of my clients' lives that I'm seeing, especially people with fixed planets in the middle degrees of fixed signs. This is forming T-squares and grand crosses, and it's like the pressure to evolve. And so we're kind of being like pinched into these tight spaces, and yet the invitation to newness is so powerful. So it's nuanced. It's what's my relationship to structure, what's my relationship to Saturn and to Uranus, change, future, evolutionary, group oriented growth. These are going to be so individual to me and to other people, but I definitely read it as a enlightened structures landing onto the planet, and the wisdom of the most innate and implicate order. So I think of Saturn as implicate order, and I think of that as like DNA. Like the DNA has such a structure to it. And Uranus is consciousness, and consciousness and soul like fill the DNA with, like they can epigenetics says we can actually change the code. And in fact, non-coding DNA, which makes up 90% or something of our DNA, is this open space for Uranus to kind of and adapt our blood lineages and even how we pass on genetics. This is some of the ways I'm thinking of it.
Wow. So you're pretty optimistic, it sounds like.
Well, goodness gracious, it's just like I have to be in order to, like, I have to have my eye on the North Star. I recognize that, like, technologically, we have technologies that put us into positions of power to change reality at exponential levels that we've ever had. And so my question is, like, what are the structures of our consciousness? Like, where are we channeling that, consciousness through, like, we need to focus. So I'm very much all about like those who feel called to the path of being awake to themselves and being in alignment with love and that which is, all the virtuous, all the, awakening energy, just to put yourself 100% into that, because as we're cusping on an age, a technological revolution that requires our stabilized consciousness and stabilized nervous systems. So it's big work that we have.
I'm remembering now that you're one of the astrologers that did focus and emphasize the nervous system this year.
Yeah.
And how important it was for us to pay attention to it, to do what we can to regulate it, stabilize it, so that it doesn't blow out with all the pressure.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of your rocket ship again.
Yes, the rocket ship.
All right, so let's talk about your mastery class. This is the perfect topic to be working with, harmonizing opposing energies as much as possible. I mean, we all have opposing energies in our chart, right? I mean, most likely there's something in it that seems to be in conflict with something else. And so it seems to me if we can harmonize these things within ourselves, we have a better chance at harmonizing these things in our world. And we're seeing lots of opposing energies in our world too. So tell us about what it is that you'll be teaching, why you feel it's important, and just give us a little bit of a taste of it.
Yeah, cool. I think I'll start with a bit of the theory and the understanding that backs the practices, and then I'll go into specifics. So the way that I envision astrology, the astrological chart is such a beautiful mandala, magic circle of the self. And it's showing us that the psyche is a composite structure of many parts. And so our birth chart shows us a particular imprint of the unique challenges that we're going to have to create a coherent coordination of meeting very different needs that the planets represent, and the signs and all of those archetypes represent these different motivating needs, these primal impulses that are trying to be satisfied and fulfilled. Mars wants autonomy and freedom to assert itself. Venus wants relationship and harmony. Those are two very different. And one thing I want to note here is that I don't see opposite energies as just opposite, signs or ruling planets. Like Venus and Mars is essentially, opposing. I see it also as, Mars and Venus as the ruler of Taurus. Aries and Taurus are very different. Mars and the moon as the ruler of Cancer. These are like the essential archetypes. So there's a lot of differences and lots of opportunities for dissonance inside of the psyche. And it wasn't until I came across voice dialogue, which I'll speak to a little bit more. And I'm not sure if you were planning on asking me about that, but
oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it wasn't until I found this practical application that says, okay, the self is a composite structure that's made up of many different selves that, just like the organs in the body, are designed to be coordinated. And what voice dialogue does is it actually invites us to be in a relationship with these different aspects of ourselves that may be feeling limited or underutilized or over functioning or in some kind of what we call in the gene keys like shadow, that we go to these extremes. So like when Mars isn't getting its need for autonomy satisfied, it can turn up the engine and start to force and push itself. On the other hand, it can go the opposite direction and repress itself and be very like fatigued and lethargic. And so it's not every single planet has where it can go too far, too much or too little. There's opposites inside of every planet, even though having the need, being a meta type of a very specific need. So when I zoom back and I look at this structure and I see, wow, there's a lot of different forces in our life. And if I am a solar system and I have planets wheeling around me in the self, what's the dynamic there? And can I look at where are there dissonant relationships between differing energies that when I'm operating from a certain level of consciousness, it's very either or. They're toggling between each other, trying to vie for our central operating system. No me, no my agenda, and then it ends up that they really can't see each other super well. They have a lot of distorted lenses on what the other one is or isn't, which is very relevant to our relationships with other people. Because other people will show up and represent these differing energies that we don't necessarily identify with or feel like is a little off balance in ourselves. So the whole practice of voice dialogue is really tending these nuanced relationships. And it's a way to live our lives from a point of consciousness, or like a reference, a space of consciousness that has this capacity to conduct and work with the energies, conduct the orchestra of all these differing planets and parts, versus those selves trying to live our lives for us and vying for our attention. And, so it's a very different frequency, and I can say more about it, but maybe I'll stop there and see if you have any questions, because I may have gone off course a little bit to
Not
what
at
you
all.
asked me.
Not at all. It's fascinating. And I'd love for you to give us an example of it.
Yeah.
But also something that you said was really interesting to me. And everything you said was interesting. There's one part that just went boom. When you talked about the consciousness level, at a certain consciousness level, it's hard for those opposing energies to see each other, and they're vying for dominance over the other one.
Yeah.
And you see that happening in our world right now, right? There's like, I see it this way, I see it this way, and I am unable to see it your way. And like you said, there's this labeling and casting off, or a perception of someone that it cannot be resolved in your viewpoint.
Yeah.
What are the levers or mechanisms that you see that enable us to get into that space of consciousness that you described, where we're more able to see the multitude of perspectives, and we're also more able to have a level of mastery where we can actually elicit or harmonize them together? And I know that's what voice dialogue is all about, but because if it's a consciousness level, it's not like you can just be like, okay, I'd like to be in another
I'm going to shift consciousness. Yeah, I hear you.
I wasn't there, but now I'm going to be here. So how does that actually happen, that process?
Yes, this is such a good question. And this is what the voice dialogue practice is all about, cultivating. And so before I get specific, what I will say is one of the biggest shifts is moving from a space of trying to fix ourselves and fix those parts, solve the problem of that issue over there that I have, to actually being in relationship with. So that's one of the biggest shifts I've had over the course of the last few years, is I now see self-development as making relations. It's not about raising frequency. It's not about, it's making connection, because life is relational. And when we can reweave the relational fabric and get curious and make space for a relationship, be with the difficult things, it does actually change much smoother. Practically, in response to your question, in the voice dialogue practice, there's two things that answer that. One is that in a facilitation that I might do with someone, or even with myself, if I'm going to talk to one of these parts of me that's really got something to say and is like, I'm pushing my thing, I'm going to actually move my chair, and we'll have a conversation with that self. No judgment, curiosity, energetic linkage. Who are you? Where'd you come from? Why do you do what you do? What's important to you? Oh, where'd you learn that? Where'd you learn how to do that? How is it going for you? How are you feeling? What's your interview this part, really get to know its whole psychological makeup, because when it lives our body, it has a posture, it takes over our neurochemistry, it has lenses of reality. It's so full on how distinct these selves are. And it's so hard. That's why life is so hard, because it's hard. We shift from self to self and we don't even know, because it's just taking over our bodies, right? Okay, so in the practice, then we move back to our center chair, and we say, leave that self where it was, leave that part of you over there, and check out, see what it feels like when you're not being that self. And over practicing this, what does it feel like when I'm not being that self? Oh, wow. I'm relaxed. Oh, this part was gripping. I feel like this whole release. Or this part was way up in my head and I feel my belly now. And we just reference the space between and learn how, and then we go to the opposite side and we have a conversation with the exact opposite part, or the part that's coming into conflict with this one, and do the same conversation and do the same coming back, and then hold the tension from a new space. So it's a very practical, like experiential, energetic exercise. The last thing I'll say is that the reason why selves go and these parts of us go into their strong identification and grips is all based on the survival brain. It's all protective strategy and wired into protect, stay alive, based on vulnerabilities when we were little babies and children and youth in this world. And we develop those strategies. So one of the big keys here then is, from this center place, I'm going to connect directly to that little child. And I'm going to say, I'm here now. That's the part of the regulating the nervous system that allows for the resilience and capacity to actually hold the tension of opposites.
Brilliant. Okay, so how is this the same or different? I know it's an astrological approach to something called internal family systems. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Is it kind of based on some similar ideas or not?
It is. It's based very much on similar ideas. The difference is internal family systems, or as far as I know, I haven't gone deep into the differences, but as far as I know, internal family systems deals more with trauma and focuses more on the family. And voice dialogue is a consciousness practice that doesn't necessarily say it's a trauma thing, but we deal with trauma all the time. And it's just related to all the relations, whether family and or just all the people. I think that's one of the main ways I understand the difference.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, incorporating astrology by itself already. Yes, exactly. Like utilizing that tool in the way that we know and applying it to these other kinds of therapies or techniques, or I love it. I was going to ask you, and I think you answered it, because you use a really key word in this whole process of voice dialoguing, which is getting curious about that part of ourselves.
Yeah.
What I've noticed is that curiosity is only accessible when we're already in a certain state of non-threatenedness. That's not a word, right? But when we're already feeling relaxed and safe enough to be curious about something that may feel threatening to our self-concept or to our security or to our viewpoint of the world, it's impossible to be curious if we're already guarded against something.
Yeah.
So my question for you is, what have you seen enables curiosity, and what have you seen squashes curiosity?
What a great question. I mean, I think it's so, I feel like the people we're around and the ways that people model this is definitely a doorway. Like the more people I'm around that have an open mind and can be curious, that enables my curiosity. It sounds like it's a very simple answer to that, but I think that there's certain ways that we can go about languaging things and saying, when a part of us is super coming with a language that's like, or someone else is coming with a language of like, this is, and it's this absolute thing of like, there's no room. It feels like there's no space to even be curious. There's conversations where, I mean, I can't really say things because that person's in a posture where I'm like, oh yeah, okay, there's no space for curiosity here. Amanda, it's such a good question. I feel like it's part of that reorienting our consciousness to a space that's not identified with one side. I think identification squashes curiosity, and I think the capacity to disidentify and open our awareness, which is a very Aquarian and Uranus thing, is a part of how we can facilitate curiosity. I'm going to think on that though, because I feel like there's more there.
Well, maybe it's a question for all of us. Because I
Right?
think it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to just witness in yourself what conditions and or ideas or perspectives enable you to ask that question, like, why do you see it that way? Or can you explain to me, like, why, how you got to that conclusion? Or, there's so many different ways. I remember this one time something happened and this person came to me and was like, I was so surprised you reacted that way. I was so surprised you reacted that strongly. And it was like this, oh, okay. Like there was so much judgment. There was like, I let this person down. I was such a disappointment. I was waiting for the question, why did you do that? Why? Like,
Yeah.
because then I could say, well, here's why. It's not because I'm a bad person or because I don't like you or because, whatever the story is. It's because of, whatever my reasons were. So it's such an incredible gift to
Yes.
give to someone to try, and like you're saying, it's about the relationships that happen, that weaving that happens when we have that openness. And what I'm hearing you say is that this voice dialogue method enables us to do that within ourselves.
Yes.
And my guess would be the more integrated we are and the more we're practicing doing that with these opposing parts of ourselves, the more we're going to be able to do that with the people in our life. I mean,
the two things that come up hearing you say that are compassion and trust. What's my own relationship to being able to hold my own space for me? If I can't hold my own space for me to be how I am and be compassionate about that, then I'm going to be so threatened when people come and have something that feels scary to me. Yeah.
All right. Can you give us an example? Can you demonstrate or show us something?
Yeah.
I'm putting
Totally.
your improv artist background to the test right now. No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Well, let me just I'll speak to my son placement in my chart and show you the different polarities that I work with my son. And then maybe we can do like a super quick, easy exercise that just to give an example.
Yes.
So my son is in Libra, but it's on my ascendant, which is Aries. It's the Aries position in the zodiac. So my expression has this polarity of Aries and Libra. So on one hand, I'm bold, I'm unthinking, I'm spontaneous, and I create excitement. And on the other hand, I'm graceful, I'm considerate, I create connection. It's all about like how people are, like the harmony in the space and beauty. On their own, both of these energies are like, don't like the other one, because Libra's considerate social harmony nature is avoiding disharmony and conflict, which Aries can do. And on the opposite, Aries, the part of my son, is avoiding the loss of self, the muted expression. So what ends up happening in the either or is I have this part of me that sort of my Libra sun will like sit back and sort of like let everyone talk first. And it's just like, pleaser, wants everyone to like her. And so holds back her expression. And then on the other side of things, I'll come in and there's a part of me that will force it and like push my energy out and be so like kind of jarring or insensitive to the timing and like kind of push too hard. And so what I've worked with is this custom dial that my astrological chart shows me is this finding the sweet spot between the two via doing different exercises, different energetic, learning how to have that dial in my hands when I need it in the context and situations when I need to dial that energy in one direction or the other. So that's like in my chart. One thing we could do, just you and me right here and the listeners that are present, is I love working with Mars as the most base level because it's such an energetic, easy energy to get. And what I would invite us to explore is what like like the just basic archetypal dial of Mars in our system, let's say as it pertains to the vitality that Mars wants us to live with, this aliveness in our bodies. So here's the exercise. Wherever you are right now, even if you're driving, it's okay, it's safe, but just move your butt over like an inch to one side or the other. And imagine you are turning up the Mars vitality dial like to 10. So floor the energy where the life force is just like, and it might feel uncomfortable. And then I'm going to invite you to move back to center. Let that energy go. See if you can come back to just a neutral. And then move your butt over 1 inch to the opposite side. And imagine turning the dial of Mars all the way to 1. So the vital energy is going very slowly, almost like well, it'll show up for you differently than me, but it's almost like a deadness. And then come back to the middle. Let that energy go. And just imagine you have that dial in your hand and see if you can just like play. So turn it up, kind of lean in one of those directions, and then see if you can find the sweet spot of energy in this moment, just flowing life force that feels like not too much or not too little. That's just a very simple way to get what we're doing here.
That was awesome, Amma Li. I didn't know I could do that. Did any of you know you could do that? Like turn up the dial and feel like such an intense amount of energy just sitting in the chair, and then turn it down and feel kind of dead and lifeless. I'm wondering too, could you do that with Mars ruling Aries and Mars ruling Scorpio, and feel the difference of Mars in Aries versus Mars in Scorpio? And then sort of toggle too, like what is Mars in Aries and what is Mars in Scorpio, and how do those things feel? And is it sometimes appropriate to show up as Mars ruling Scorpio and vice versa, and sometimes Aries, right?
I think that's a really great additional, it opens up and actually demonstrates that this is a vast playground. There are so many combinations. When you look at your chart, your Mars is in a sign. And like you're saying, just even based on different rulerships, it's going to have a different flavor. Right. It's going to show. That's why that was the most generalized exercise. But what I like to do is work with custom dials. If your Mars is in Cancer, it's going to have, when it quiets down or picks up, it's going to have a different quality. In fact, sometimes, like I was demonstrating with my son, is that one side of things is the sign and the other side of things is the planet, and they're trying to work out how to make that difficult placement work for you. So it's a way to synergize the energies versus, again, the extremes of swinging from pendulum side to pendulum side. And what that looks like relationally in our lives is just, it's so difficult to navigate dissonant energies when they're not, when we don't have that capacity in our own self system. It just, everything, like I heard a woman, Jamie Elizabeth, say, we are responsible for the way that life lands upon us. And I think about this as we have the corresponding archetypal points and energetics internally as life externally. So it's all this corresponding relationships. And if I'm in some inner dysfunction around something, it's gonna show up. And the people I judge and the people I admire are my greatest teachers, because they're offering me a dose of some other medicine or energetic that I need to enter into my system to become coherent. because ultimately this whole chart is a symbol of the self becoming individuated at its fullest potential, which is that the actualization of all of our psychological potentials represented by these planets are in a state of cooperative balance and harmony as they differentiate themselves and then reconnect into a coordinated harmony.
Oh gosh, I love this so much. And I can see what you're saying. It's the playing out of these energies and the harmonizing of them is pretty endless. Because then I was like, oh, I wonder what Saturn in Aquarius feels like.
Yeah,
You know,
totally.
like
Yeah.
Uranus in Taurus, like,
Mm-hmm.
just playing out all these different, those like seem opposite, like Uranus and Taurus, especially, right?
Mm-hmm.
How amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
And this is going to be so much fun to do together in the mastery class setting. You're going to be going deeper and giving us more and more tools to be able to do this ourselves.
Yes.
So that's so exciting. And for those of you unfamiliar with the inner circle, the guide for the month, or the lunar month, is there to give 2 forecast events, a new moon and a full moon forecast. They are present in our online Facebook group and answering questions and really acting as like a mentor for the students in the inner circle for the month, and also presenting a mastery class teaching, also giving us what we call soul work assignments. So opportunities to actually have practices and work very physically, tangibly with the energy of that lunar cycle, with the energy of the mastery class. And it all just comes together. It's really this opportunity to embody the astrology as much as possible, because what we found is astrology can be quite heady. And when we keep it in our head, it just has, it's great, but it has limited opportunity to really change things fundamentally for you, actually impact the way that you're living your life. And so when we actually embody the astrology, we don't have to memorize things anymore. We can feel it. We know it because we have experience with it. It's just a whole different level of learning. And so it's one of the things that's a big focus of the inner circle, is making sure that we're not just philosophical, not just theoretical, but bringing it into our lives on a daily basis. So, and you're really good at doing that, Amma Li.
Kind of my jam.
Yeah, we choose astrologers who are really good at doing that, and not all astrologers do that. It's not completely the way that they like to practice, which is totally fine too. But the inner circle, because it is such a focus, it is something that we are really careful of selecting the astrologers that they can do that. So we're very excited to have you.
Yeah, I mean, it's such in line with, I was like that for so long. I was conceptual in astrology, like the maps and the frameworks, and I'm a very heady kind of person. But it wasn't until, honestly, this voice dialogue practice that had me, oh my gosh, like going into the energies, actually having relationship with these parts of me, that I started to move from the map into the actual terrain of what that map is just a representation of. And it felt like going from my wheels spinning to actually gaining traction and agency inside of my growth. So that's
wow.
definitely a value that I share with Astrology Hub.
Yes, that is powerful. And it's something that, I think if when you were in your head learning and someone had said that to you, it might feel very abstract, right? Like it'd be like, oh, that sounds great, but how do you actually do it? So it sounds like this voice dialogue was this mechanism by which you were able to access these deeper layers, which is, yes.
That's a great way to put it. Yes, that's how I experienced it. Mm-hmm.
Very nice. All right. Well, if you love Amma Li Grace and you want to hear more from her tomorrow, which is June 3rd. So if you're listening to the recording, it's June 3rd. Even if you listen to this recording and the event is past, please go to astrologyhub.com/solstice panel, and we'll be able to get you the replay as long as you're in the replay window, which is through this weekend. The date of that, I think, is June 6th. So make sure you just go and sign up, and we'll get you the recording. You'll be able to hear from Amma Li Grace and 6 other astrologers. I'm going to tell you their names just in case you know and love some of them as well. Judith Hill, Tom Jacobs, Divine Harmony, Cameron Allen, Ari Moshe Wolf, and Kira Taborn. So that I'll be with all of them tomorrow. And I'm going to be popping into the inner circle later today to see if you have any specific questions for these astrologers about the astrology that's going to be with us through the end of 2021 and into 2022. So the event is entirely free. Join us, astrologyhub.com/solstice panel. And Amma Li, I always know like this time spent with you are going to be mind expanding and heart expanding. And I just really appreciate who you are and what you bring to all of us at the Astrology Hub community. So thank you. And looking forward to hanging out with you again tomorrow. And all of you, hopefully, you can be there too.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. Thank you for being here, for being a part of our community, and as always, for making astrology a part of your life. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care, everyone.